Traffic curing.
Investments, funds are put out for investments. They must go into the investment made.
Today, democracy in Nigeria has become largely transactional.
Welcome. This is Patitos Gang, and we come with a burden for the Naira. Now, once upon a long time ago, there used to be something called the Zimbabwe dollar. It still exists, actually. But it went down, down, and down, and down, and down until we could see it no more. And the people are asking, is Nigeria's Naira bound the way of Zimbabwe's dollar? I don't know. I'll be very clear, I'm not one of those fixated on nominal values of currencies, exchange rates. Back in the mid-70s or so, Nigeria's exchange rate in the other direction diverged markedly from its purchasing power parity. And that created for Nigeria the crisis of 1982-83 that led us into the structural adjustment program. And there are people who say today that the Naira is much undervalued. And there are people saying, no, let the market determine. Because there's much in between what markets do and reality. So, can the Naira be redeemed? Where is it actually? Now, smarter people than me are around here, so we can put mind to the matter. Can the Naira rise again? Gentlemen, can it rise again? Is it consigned to history? Will it travel the path of the CD? Will we be looking for decimalization strategies to, whatever? Where is the Naira? What happened to the Naira? Why is it where it is, and where may it be going? Anthony, I know that you and Naira are friends.
Yeah. Well, it's a good way to look. The good way to look at it is to remind ourselves that any phenomenon which is a social phenomenon can go anyway. It can go up if we're managed. It can go down, or better still, continue to go down if badly managed. I mean, that's a good place to start from. We should remind our viewers, or remind ourselves, that what makes a currency strong or weak are two factors. One is internal, the other is external. The internal factors are things like inflation and growth, generally. The external one is interaction with the rest of the world, which is the counter trade, to see the trade balance that we have. We are in a situation where our production is reducing because we're not producing. Our consumption is increasing, partly because we're growing. And, consumption
more people.
Grows. More people. There's nothing you can do about that if we keep growing. But also because our consumption is not just growing, it's also a consumption that has developed a taste for exotic things. Now, I want to be very clear about this. Really, I'm not against people liking foreign things. What worries me is that we're not producing anything enough to counter that taste. There is an example which Professor Patitos is actually guilty of teaching over, I think, 20 years ago, when you made that example to say, what is the true cost of the dollar anywhere in the world? And we ended up that session agreeing that it is the cost of McDonald's.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I say this to go back to that point you were making, that some people argue that it's overvalued, it's undervalued. That's the kind of argument you do because you want to express yourself. It's because you want to do freedom of speech. In reality, contrary to what people think, economics is not so subjective. You can actually calculate it. Take any object that is used everywhere in the world, where the things to make it are the same. The cost to make that product, wherever you are, is the cost of the dollar.
Absolutely.
So the cost of McDonald's is the true cost of the dollar.
Because McDonald's ensures that every bite is the same quality, wherever it is produced in the world. So if it takes 200 pounds to make that McDonald's hamburger and takes 20,000 naira to make it, that's the exchange rate. So of course there are other measures like purchasing power parity and all of those that are typically used, but this is a classic measure of purchasing power parity, the McDonald's. However, it is important to just underline, especially for the Nigerian situation, that deliberate care in how you organize an economy is so important for where it goes. Nigeria has deliberately refused to do the right thing for a very long time. And I just give some parameters because of our production. We don't produce what we want the most. Look, I don't see in some of the richest countries in the world the number of SUVs I see in Abuja.
And gadgets.
Every Nigerian kid has to have an iPhone. Yes, of course, some people have worked hard and deserve to have it. But everybody is consuming massively what they don't produce. And we're not producing what we can exchange with those who are producing those things. So where are you going? In 1996, I attended an Aspen Institute conference in Paris, in Annecy, in France, called by former French Prime Minister Raymond Barre, Aspen Institute, France. And the theme was, Africa must produce or die. And much of Africa has refused to produce, some better than others. Nigeria has failed totally to produce, so Nigeria is dying. How do you get this into the consciousness of policymakers and ordinary people who think that exchange rate is just what government decides to do, they can change it and do? It's not. If you don't produce, you can't exchange. So you have one or two things. You stop consuming what others produce. And so all these exotic cars, it's crazy to have them. Or you produce massively and have enough to buy all the things that you want to buy.
I think we should also add, though, there's something philosophical about it, at least for me. The control on demand, I think, is an individual choice. And any time somebody wants to tell me what to consume, I always have an allergy for it. My instinct is to rebel. It's a freedom thing. I think what we need to do is a collective decision to produce. And the idea is comparative advantage. We don't really have to produce everything that we consume. No. We just have to specialize in some areas.
The ones who can do very well.
These are the ones we're going to be known for. And I think once we do that, then collective, again, once we get a total volume to say, this is the total number of what we consume, let us make sure what we earn from production outweighs
more than that.
What we consume, and the Naira can rise.
And just, you know, as you gentlemen come in, I just want to put this one more thing on the floor around this, that if we are going to produce, we need a strategy. We seem to just jump into things. The strategy that I favor today is generally referred to in structural economics as latent comparative advantage on our factor endowments and the value chains that flow from that. What does this jargon really mean? It means, like, as Professor Killer has said, you don't want to produce everything because you can't. You take those things that God has gifted you in. And there's no part of Nigeria that doesn't have a major factor endowment that it can build on. So you take that factor, whether it is sesame seed in north central Nigeria, or gum arabic in northwest Nigeria, or
palm oil
in southeast Nigeria, or even the value chain derivatives of the hydrocarbons value chain in Bayelsa. And in that area, you essentially create industrial policy, limited industrial policy, not general import substitution type tariff barriers. And you concentrate on those selected products, become the best producers, the least cost producers in the world in those things. Then you can go and buy any Mercedes you want to buy.
Yeah, that is true.
You know, anyway.
You probably, if I might take it from you there, deliberate industrial policy, and to come up with that, you know, there's no way you can do that without growing and encouraging the private sector participation, because government can't really be in the art of producing or manufacturing. Private sector players need to be encouraged. Like you said, better tariffs and tax regimes on, you know, importation of the equipment or the resource, and then of course, you know, when they are also exporting at the ports, you know, make sure that, you know, like, you know, the measures there are friendly and also encouraging. But importantly, I want also to divert, you know, a bit from what Professor Killer said about deliberate policies. The role of the parallel market, what happens there, is also a source of concern that we should also be looking at. In recent times, few days ago, the CBN was delicensing about 4,000 and something BDCs, you know, Bureau de Change Operators. Perhaps Nigeria is the only place in the world where you have parallel market on exchange rate, on dollar, you know, dollar and Naira. So I think, you know, government should look at that again.
Well, I think it's supply demand. Simple.
Yeah.
Everywhere in the world you have bureau de changes everywhere.
Yeah.
At the airport, on the streets in London.
But sometimes too, you know, the role of those operators, you know, have an influence on.
It's because of scarcity.
On the weakness.
It's because of the scarcity.
So something is also is going on there.
Yeah, something may be going on. I mean, in 1997, George Soros played this big game on Asian currencies during the so-called Asian financial crisis. Yeah. So you can have a targeting of a currency by market players. So that is possible. But I think that in the main, and even that Asian financial crisis of 1997, what made it happen was that the Asians were so gung-ho on growing that they took their eyes off their current account situation. Once there was a current account deficit that was significant, it was easy for a clever operator like
to exploit it.
To exploit it.
Yes.
That's what is happening in Nigeria's case. Yes, there may be players in the bureau de change business who are taking advantage of it, but it became possible because the Central Bank of Nigeria allowed multiple exchange rates and the games were already being played. People were getting rich for doing absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
So I think I would like to mention the role which true leadership plays in all of this, and the fact that we know what to do as a nation, but giving it expression has really been an issue because the body language of the ruling class doesn't seem to show that there's any change in the offering at the moment. And that itself is a major issue when it comes to asking the question if the Naira is going to come alive again. Okay, so when we say the taste for foreign and exotic goods, it starts with leadership. I mean, just see one local government chairman or one governor put a convoy of how many cars on the road? And SUVs.
And all foreign.
All foreign and that. So that's an issue, and I feel that that's where it all begins. Everything rises and falls on leadership.
Yeah,
really.
absolutely right. I mean, I just to close this section with a little, not a joke, real. I was in Cairo for a meeting of the Afri-Exim Bank, and of course, Nigerian bank MDs were all there in their drones, so we were staying in this very posh hotel and everything, and they had ordered a limo to take them to the meeting venue, you know, serious car that you will have in Nigeria, and then Toyota Corolla or something shows up. They said, we say limo. They said, yes, this is the one limo. And I just went to one corner and I was just smiling, you know, because That is the mindset. Here we are, and that day we were going to see where Egypt was, their new power system, how much they had achieved in short. So the emphasis was the real thing. Our bank MDs were annoyed that the corona was a leap for them to pick them. Anyway, that's what the Nigerian problem is. This mindset. And we're going to get to that in some depth. Meanwhile, let's take a break. This is Patitos Gang, and we'll be right back. We are back. This is Patitos Gang, and we've been talking the Naira, its rise, fall, and where it is. And it's important to make a point about this, about the discipline and the values of the political class and how these set the standards. We've been talking about motorcades and politicians' obsession with buying SUVs, National Assembly members. There was a time in this country when the political class didn't even buy any cars at all. You were a member of National Assembly, you came from Ileoluji or Port Harcourt or Zamfara, wherever. You came to Legico Flats in Lagos. Yeah. Took your taxi from the train station, or when they came by train, they didn't even fly. Yeah. And then they would get to Legico Flats and go and make laws and go back home. Oil ruined the psyche of Nigeria. And one of the terrible things that oil does is that the non-tradable goods sector, you know, Julius Berger, construction, they rise. Yeah. Because you have that dollar money you're converting to Naira to use to build these things. Then oil prices slip, and suddenly you can't pay your bills. Many countries have tried to deal with that problem by never going gaga and wild like Nigeria. By very early in the day, saving a portion of that windfall, so to speak, into a future fund. These days they call them sovereign wealth funds. And then you can use those savings to drive infrastructure growth, to invest abroad, so that even when oil prices are not, you can be getting dividends to run. Nigeria stoutly refused to do the reasonable. I don't know how many times in the last 30 years I've given talks about how we could break down receipts into three funds. One is your budget, which has to be at a modest, level. Two is a fund that you can draw on when things are not going as well as they should go. And then the third is long-term savings, because these resources, these revenues belong to all generations of Nigerians. But the rascality of the Nigerian political class has been anti their children. Anti their children. I'm not joking about this. And deferred gratification is not in their thinking. Get it, grab it, use it, share it, and they're killing the country. How can the people be educated to understand that even in your household, in fact, if you are the head of the household, you suddenly win raffle, whatever they call it in Nigeria, pool. Are you just going to go and buy everything you can see the next day? Are you not going to think, oh, let me put some away for some? So this is what Nigeria is dealing with. So when we talk budget and it sounds esoteric, it's just the same thing as a family and how a family manages. What should we be doing to the ordinary person on the street to make him understand where we are and what we must do besides dealing with the rascals in politics?
I think a bit. Government will have to come in again, whether we like it or not, deliberately. Even from the way they run their affairs, fiscal discipline. When investments, funds are put out for investments, they must go into the investments they were allocated for. I remember, in the maiden address of the current president, he talked about growing production clusters across the 6 zones. The Federal Ministry of Trade and Industry haven't come out with, the actual plan to start implementing. So what kind of manufacturing or production facilities are they churning out? And with which private organizations? How are they going to, put it out? So sincerity of purpose in policies will also help. Secondly, the reorientation, like Prof mentioned, some governments, outside, whether in the East or in the West, in the world, the power of orientation is very key. We have the National Orientation Agency, which is so dormant. It's an agency of the Federal Ministry of Information. These are the kind of agencies that should come up and inculcate the discipline of business growth, savings, investment, and then agencies also like SMEDA, who are in the business of growing small and medium-scale industries, are not also walking the talk. So these are some of the things, that government and these agencies should begin to act out, what they say they will do. So this will help to grow the production culture, the savings culture, and of course, it will have effects on the economy and also drive the currency to the Naira.
Yeah, I'd like to toe your line as well, but also differ slightly. I believe truly that the government has a huge role to play in educating and enlightening the entire populace and the way to go. But the reality is that the talk is different from the walk, in the sense that we have things being said in the media and the actual practice is kind of different. You just mentioned a few agencies of government that are out there and seem not to be achieving their very purpose for existence. However, I feel that government is also a reflection of who we are as a people. The values of our nation fully eroded has now continually to produce leadership from amongst us that seem not to be able to defer any set of gratification or delay it, or even have any sense of sacrifice for the next generation. And that is a culture that exists right now. I've often understood that leadership has a way of shaping culture and ultimately should be able to help that culture to define it in the way that you go. But if that's not happening from the top, then is there something that can be done from the bottom? And that is where I was saying I would like to, not necessarily defer, but just to add that we can't completely abandon that responsibility to government at this time in our history.
Prof, if I can say something, just because of time, I think it's very crucial. So, perhaps I'm eccentric or even sick, I don't know. But in the case of Nigeria, government amuses and irritates me. I'll tell you who breaks my heart. The private sector. Corporate Nigeria, middle class Nigeria, are the people that upset me, they disappoint me, they actually make me feel sick. Because in reality, if we had a proper crop of corporate managers, we can take on this government at any time. Because the means of productions, if they are in the hands of those that have the spine to define themselves as free citizens, the true stakeholders of the country, they should contend. Corporate Nigeria, I argue and challenge, should contend the sphere of leadership with political Nigeria to show them what it means where merit matters. You see, where merit matters, tribe and religion will not even come to play. Where output matters, where I am rich because I produce 100 cars. I am famous because I've invented a solution. I think my problem with Nigeria overall is the absence of corporate Nigeria, of the middle class, that has allowed the space to people who become leaders, people who've made fame and fortunes by luck. Just because they were appointed. Some people have become ministers when they didn't know the night before, or they didn't know the role they were going to cover till that morning. People who say, let me be your leader, vote for me, vote for me. There's no merit, there's no strength there.
As a very serious senior doctor who has invented an injection for people like you, I can tell you that a cure is on the way.
Yeah.
But it might be long ways. Problem, and you're absolutely right. I mean, Nigerian private sector breaks my heart also. Partly because what has happened is that we have not grown an independent private sector in the main. Because entrepreneurship has not become culture. There are many people who are quote-unquote private sector leaders that are just agents of the public sector, who are people who just get contracts from people in public life and all of that. And you know, there's a quote I keep repeating. It's amazing that I quote a high life musician so frequently. Ben Bracco, a famous Ghanaian high life musician. And he says that any country where the politicians are richer than the businessmen is a country about to collapse. And Nigeria is a classic example of that. And the politicians are in cahoots with the businessmen. I have sat in aircrafts. Fortunately for me, I end up traveling business class. And I listen to so-called leaders of the private sector, chief executives. No, the next election, you will not be, we've allowed them to be doing this thing. The next election, they go at night and give the criminals money and all of that, and the criminals win, and they're wondering, why is our country like this? But, you know, I refer to it in one of my books as the complicit middle. They're complicit. Private sector guys can pretend all they like, but they are complicit in the failure of Nigeria. And that's the sad place where we are. We need to build a new elite, an entrepreneurial elite, a civil society elite, a new political elite. If not, because values shape human progress and leaders set the tone of culture, it is pointless for us to think that Nigeria will just get right if the kinds of people who run Nigeria continue to run Nigeria. There are examples we can set that will affect the Naira. I mean, we've given some today, like consumption. You know, we're not producing what we're consuming like crazy, the most exotic things from around the world. And the basis for producing is there, we can produce. But it's hard work and we don't want to work hard. Just extract rent and buy a big car, anybody will hail you, musicians will sing about you, and all of that. The media is the biggest culprit. Media has failed this country because they are the ones who hold up these characters as accomplished people. They are not accomplished people. They are people who have ruined their fatherland. And for me, and this is a chapter in a new book I'm writing, and looking at grit. It's not geniuses that build a country. It's people who persevere and persevere. These people who persevere have to recognize that ultimately what I call faith is a big driver of their perseverance. And this faith involves understanding the three judgments. The ultimate judgment of your conscience, the judgment of history, and the judgment of God. I hope we are judged fairly. We've got to go. We'll see you next week. This has been Patitos Gang.